And we are live. Yep. No problem.
Okay.
Yep. Excellent. And we are live in 5, 3, 2. It's movie time, and we're back again with movie time. Hey, everyone. Hope that you had a fantastic weekend, and welcome to Wednesday, and that you had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend with us. And today on our show, we have Mr. Franco Sama with us back again. It's like we finally got him back. It's like, I think that this has to become a once-a-year visit with us. Wouldn't you say, Franco?
Well, I hope so. It's great to be back. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And with me also, we have our co-host Arpo, who is having a little bit of technical difficulties at the moment. I think that he is the victim of our same thunderstorm that we had today. But he will be right with us. And it's like, so Franco, tell us a little bit, to refresh our audience, a little bit about your background again, and with regards to that. Hello, Arpo. It's like, welcome to hello. And I was about to ask Franco if he can catch us up on this past year of a little bit of what he has been up to with us.
Sure, absolutely. So for starters, just to refresh your memory, my company is called Sama Films, and I am an executive producer primarily, although I do produce as well. Over the last 12 to 14 years, so I've been in the industry for 20 years. I started off as a publicist, but as a producer, I started my first company in 2005. My first movie came up to theaters in 2007. It was called Tooth and Nail with Michael Madsen and Vinnie Jones. And since then, I've done over 22 successful independent feature films, and I have approximately 14 films in development at the moment. And about 3 of those are on the front burner, meaning that in all likelihood they'll be shot this year and will be released next year. I average 2 to 3 films per year as far as out into the world is concerned.
Oh, that's fantastic. Also, a little bit about last time though that we had a little bit of a chance to talk. It's like we were talking a lot about some of the things that are going into this, and it's like a while back we were talking about finance and like what are some of the evolutions that have actually now happened in the industry since I know like from year to year there is something new that actually becomes very popular and comes forward in time.
What in terms of financing?
Correct. Yes.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, right now at this moment, the standard structures are still the most popular ones in terms of bringing in equity, which is the key. You got to have equity, cash on hand, which is always the hardest. First, money is typically the most difficult to get, but once you have that first money, the rest comes along fairly quickly. And the standard routine is to bring in tax incentives from tax-friendly environments and states and countries. Very, very popular these days. And part of what I can do is I'm able to monetize those tax incentives up front in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So the filmmaker can usually, use those funds to make the movie as opposed to waiting for the film to be completed before they can cash in. But specifically to answer your question, we're working on something right now. It's a little premature. One of the things that in the independent film world we've been working on diligently is trying to find better ways to protect investors.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, when the movie itself fails, say at the box office or in terms of the returns,
Mm-hmm.
there's a safety net underneath them to catch those dollars in case that happens. So that's a program that I've been working on with some major bank high profile individuals. So like I said, it's a little premature to sort of get into that right now, but suffice it to say that there is a plan being designed right now that will, I think, has the potential
Mm-hmm.
to revolutionize the film financing industry on an independent level. I don't know if you recall, but one of my
Yes.
catch my primary catchphrases to filmmakers, especially first and second time filmmakers, is that getting the money isn't the hard part. Getting the money back is the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's the world that I live in, right? So raising $1 million or $2 million for a film after all the years I've been doing this isn't the problem. The problem is if I raise $1 million for the film, how can I demonstrate up front to a potential investor that I can bring in $3 million, so that they not only make their money back, of course, plus their ROI, but that they make significant profit beyond that. So that's always my mission.
That's actually quite interesting that you bring that up because I was always, it's like this figure has dashed around for a number of years in terms of percentages that you give back to your investor, in that to make it attractive for them to actually initially invest. In regards to that, people have bounced around different figures. Is there a standardized in the industry of 110, 120? What is the percentage that usually is given as an ROI?
There absolutely is an industry standard, and that industry standard is 20%. So, for me personally, and then beyond that, right? Because the 20% is just the ROI, but then after the investors recoup their entire 120%, there's a 50-50 split of every additional dollar that comes in, which
Mm-hmm.
means the investors, going to receive half of every dollar in perpetuity for the rest of time, as are the filmmakers. I don't want filmmakers to lose sight of the fact
Yeah.
that they make money. They make money too. It's not just about the investors making money. It's about the filmmakers making money. I often say, if you're interested in making a movie, I'm not really your guy. But if
Yeah.
you're interested in having a long-term filmmaking career where you want to build out and play the long game over a long period of time, that's what my investors are interested in. That's what my distributors are interested in. But just to go back quickly to your question,
Yeah.
in terms of that, if I see a presentation deck that's presented to me and they're talking about 10 or 15% return, I'm just not interested. I won't even help them with it, because that's just not the way it works. It would be extremely rare for it to be higher than 20%. So, for all intents and purposes, 20% is the number.
So it is 120. It is the standardized number. So it's like their initial plus 20%, because it really doesn't pay for them to actually invest into the film. If they got 15%, they could keep it in a different kind of investment other than film. And
Well, to be honest with you, that's even true at 20%.
yeah.
I often say that, the investors, somebody who's going to write a check for $2 or $3 million,
Mm-hmm.
they're not doing it to make 20%. Those people can make 20% literally in their sleep, right? Because their money is working for them already, when they're in that position. So they don't need us. They don't need filmmakers to make a mere 20%. The reason that's not why they invest in these movies. The reason they invest in these movies is because of the potential upside. And the potential upside is what I just said. So, for example, let's say that I made a movie for $1 million, right?
Yes.
And let's say it ended up making $5.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to pay back 1.2, right? Because that's the million plus the 20%. So after I pay back the 1.2 million, I
Mm-hmm.
net $4 million. If I net $4 million, 2 million of that goes to the investors,
True.
and 2 million goes to the filmmakers. It's a 50-50 split. So that investor put up $1 million. Not only do they get 200,000 for their return, but they get an extra 2 million on top of the 200. So they bring in $2.2 million above and beyond their initial principal investment. That's why they do it.
Okay, because they're looking at the aftermath. It's not only the initial investment plus the interest, they're looking at the perpetuity in that, if they're using it as an equity investment.
They're looking for the upside. Now, that's not to say that the upside always happens, because it doesn't always happen. But that's their objective. That's all of our objective, right? Our objective is
Absolutely.
to make great films. But if
Yeah, you cannot be sitting there going like, I made great art and nobody is going to. Yeah, it's like you.
Because what happens is that nobody's seeing your great art. If you're not making money, that means that the film isn't getting distribution and nobody is seeing your great art. So at that point, you're making great art for the sake of making great art. And in my world, as a distribution expert, I'm all about making money on films. I can't see the potential on any given project to go all the way to the point where it's actually going to make significant returns for investors, then I can't really get involved because at this point in my career, I turned 60 years old this year. I'm
Mm-hmm.
20 years, celebrated 20 years in the industry. I'm not in a position to lose money for investors. Just can't do it.
No, it has to be something that is available for them, and it's like that will make them happy and you happy because it's like you want to be able to go into the next 60 years with a real happy projections.
That's a great way to look at it. And at the end of the day, the reality is, um, you know what? There's no guarantees. So I can't promise anybody that they're going to make money. All I can do is put all of the mechanisms at my disposal into place whereby I can reasonably project
Mm-hmm.
what those plans are going to be. Because at the end of the day, it is an investment, therefore, it's inherent risk, and there is no crystal ball. So I can't look into the future and say what a movie's going to make. All I can do is look at the projections, look at the valuations, and hope for the best and make the best movie I can make.
Well, which does make sense in regards to it. And also, it's like it then brings me into that whole entire thing of the projections. Now that digital, other markets have come into there, it's like the sales projections have got to have been come like a really crazy thing. The sales projections that you had 10 years ago when you didn't have these new markets have got to be a completely topsy turvy, upside down kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about what has gone on with the projection lists? It's like, and what's considered now bankable as opposed to in the past?
Yes, in fact, I'm really glad you asked that question. And the reason is because it's a little bit, it's one of my pet peeves. I have a little bit of a pet peeve around that. And let me tell you why. The valuations or the interchangeable terms would include projections or sales estimates, right? Those are all
Yes.
basically the same. So even the terminology has changed, right? We don't call them sales estimates anymore. We call them valuations. So um, those valuations, those are based on four criteria. Okay, you have
Mm-hmm.
a bankable cast, obviously. That's
Yes.
going to be critical. The director, who is directing the film, and what kind of track record do they have? Number three is the genre, and number four is the budget level. So those are the four factors that go into this, right? Well, these days, in the age of the internet, there are lots of sites and companies where you can pay X amount of dollars, um, and you can have them give you what they consider to be valuations. The problem, in my experience, in my world, I'm sort of an old-fashioned guy. I like to do it the old-fashioned way. And in the new age, what they do is they've created these algorithms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, an algorithm is fine for certain things. I don't believe that an algorithm is appropriate when you're trying to get valuations because you're going to mislead your investors. In my world, my new program, it's not really new. It's got a new name because I didn't have a name for it, but I call it the Film Finance or the Finance Indie Roadmap. And
Yes.
the Finance Indie Roadmap is just that, right? It's a roadmap to get from your script to the screen because most people don't know how to get through the development process. And that's what I help first and second time filmmakers do. And the absolutely number one most critical document that you must obtain during that development process are these sales evaluations. And if you're online getting, quotes and paying all of this money for an algorithm, you're going to be sorely disappointed when you're 60% off base when it
Yeah.
comes to the actual recoupment of the film. And now you have an investor who's put up all this money based on those valuations, and they're unable to get their money back. It's the kiss of death for a first or second time filmmaker. So therefore, when I talk about the old-fashioned way. In my company, we're literally, the team of people that I've assembled are sales agents around the international and domestic sales leaders that actually pick up the phone and call buyers in not every country, but they'll select maybe 8 or 10 territories around the world, and they'll actually pitch the film itself based on the 4 criteria I gave you earlier.
Yes.
Right? We'll get a real live number of how much the buyer in Germany or France or China would actually pay for this specific movie based on this set of criteria. It's not some calculated algorithm guess or formula. It's actually getting on the phone and finding out what the numbers are. That way, we're gonna get much closer in terms of the margin of error when the time comes.
And also, they are kind of, you can also find out the warmth of whether it is bankable, not bankable, as well as also, would they even buy it?
Exactly. I call it the moment of truth. Because, you could do all this development and you can get to a certain point and then you find out, and I've had it happen. I've had clients bring me projects that looked great on the surface. The script was fine. We went through the development. We got a budget. You have to have a real budget. You can't guesstimate the budget. So in my development process, we create a budget. We create a schedule. We have all of that. We take the steps one at a time, and we build it out until we get to the point where we can then assess it from an international and domestic perspective when it comes to these numbers. And you might get to that point and find out your numbers aren't good. And so if you've got a budget of $1.5 million, in the evaluations, they're going to give you 3 numbers, right? Low, medium, and high.
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb is you want your low to be a minimum of 3 times budget. So if your budget is $1 million, your low should be 3, your middle should be 5 or 6, and your high should be 8, 9, or 10 million dollars. That's the ideal scenario. Well, if I've got a movie that's $2 million budget and my low is 1.2 and my high 3 million, I'm sorry, my middle is 3 million and my high is 5 or 6, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
That's trouble. How can I go to an investor? It's easy to go to an investor and say, I project if you give me 2 million, in the worst case scenario, I'm going to make 6. That's a great way to go, right?
Yes.
But if I go to an investor and go, well, here are the numbers. If you give me $2 million, in the best case scenario, I'm going to get it back.
Yeah.
They're not going to write the check, and you can't blame them for doing so. So sometimes you have to go through that development process to get to that point just to find out that your numbers don't work. Now, that said, that doesn't mean you can't change those numbers.
Yes.
You can put on a different director. You can get different casts. You can start seeking out different casts. There's a lot of ways you can improve those numbers, but you're not going to be able to improve them unless you know where your starting point is.
Most definitely.
Now, the last time you were on, you talked about, how incentives also play a role in that. And you mentioned that the Hollywood incentive system was like a lottery, pulling names out of our hat. Has Hollywood figured out yet that maybe that they can keep more business in town if they just start offering a few more incentives?
Well, yes and no. So I can't believe you remember that.
Yes.
Yes and no. And let me tell you why. So Hollywood, in this case, means the state of California, because it's the state.
Correct.
The state dictates that, and it's a state program. So yes, it has improved to the extent that it is no longer lottery based, which is only fairly recent. That said, it's not really geared towards folks like me, right? Remember, my sweet spot is 1 to 3 million. So the movies that I make, you'll see, tend to be in that budget range. Yes, of course, I have a few that may be under $1 million, and I have a few that have been over 3 million. But generally, that's the space that I reside in because that's where I'm comfortable and that's where my investors are.
Yes.
That said, The tax incentive program in the state of California is more designed for television shows, episodics, and these big, heavy profile movies that are going to be 50 or 180, $150 million films. And that's just not what I do. So even now, despite the improvements in the program, I still tend to shoot outside of state. I have a movie, two of the films I told you about, of the three that I plan to get made this year, set up to go to probably Utah, because they have a pretty good program. Tennessee has a rebate program, which is better than a tax credit program, and Louisiana, of course, is sort of a staple, although they're having some issues of their own when it comes to the politics around the incentive program. So you really have to do your research before you make that decision. And then the other thing you have to weigh out, and again, particularly in my case, because my budget for under $3 million, is does it make sense to maybe forego the 20 or 25% tax credit, which is a big bonus, right?
Yes.
People take it lightly. I mean, basically, if you get a 25% tax credit on $1 million, that's $250,000 that you're going to get back. So that's definitely something to take seriously. At the same time, what you have to weigh that against is, many of the name actors that I want in my movies live right here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, and if I do fly them out to Utah or Louisiana, I got to fly them first class. I have to put them in a 5-star hotel. There's a lot of things. I have to have a trailer. There's all this stuff I have to do that the big movies do that I now am responsible for. And at the end of the day, it's probably going to be more cost effective to forego that 20%, 25%, and keep here close, or I can send an Uber over to their house to pick them up and bring them back and forth to set every day for a fraction of the cost.
True. And also it depends on location. It's also sometimes it depends on also a lot of things. It's like if you can get away with certain things with that, it's like,
because you have to look at the locality.
Yeah.
A lot of these places you can cheat them for places. I mean, I can't tell you how many movies have been shot in Louisiana that are set in New York City.
Yeah.
And so you can send a second unit crew to do some establishing shots in Manhattan, in Times Square, and then come here and do them through all your interiors and everything else on a back lot somewhere that looks like New York City. There's lots of creative ways you can do that.
Yeah.
So you said that California, in terms of supported with incentives, is leaning towards those big tentpole blockbusters. Is Hollywood really gambling on that for its future, or should they perhaps be gambling more on the small independent films that are, not as expensive, but maybe catch the people, the sleeper hits?
Yeah. Well, whether they should or whether they will, it's
obviously your opinion.
Like whether they should or whether they will are two completely different. Yes, they should. No, they probably won't. And let me tell you why. I mean, what's happening now is, in fact, the divide has grown even greater now, right? Look at what's happening in the studio system. This is, to be completely honest with you, this is this is the reason. If I had to say one primary reason why I created the Finance Indie Roadmap, is because the studio system is that. It's a system, right? They have it all figured out. They've been doing this for generations, right? And in the studio system, an intellectual property or script, project, or pitch comes in the front door and goes out the back door. It gets, in the process, it gets greenlit. The money literally drops into the bank account. They go on set for 3 months and they shoot the thing, and they do all of those things, and then it goes into post and it comes out of post and it goes, bam, it goes 5,000 theaters around the United States and then around the world. That's the studio system. And because that mechanism has so much upkeep, these guys are relying on these huge tentpole movies. This is the reason why you're getting all of these remakes and why you're getting all of these superhero movies.
Okay.
they're doing these, $200 million budget films, and and they're banking on those films. And if those films don't work, um, the system could implode potentially. So there was a time several years. I mean, look, if you think about it, if you look back at
Mm-hmm.
the Oscars over the last 7 or 8 years,
Yes.
the vast majority of the best pictures, particularly this year, were all independent films.
Yep.
They're made now. They may be distributed through the studio system, but they're made independently. And so, should they um, seriously consider looking at that? Of course they should. I don't think they will. And I'll tell you why. Because they tried that. Probably about 8 or 10 years ago, there was a time when all of the major studios, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Sony, Sony Classics, remember them? They
Yep.
started these little independent versions of themselves.
Yes.
With the idea that, well, these guys are all capitalizing, making all this money. Well, we can do the same thing because we're the big studios. Well, it didn't work. And as all you have to do is look and see that they're all gone. They were like, this
Oh yeah.
thing isn't. This low budget thing just isn't our thing. And let's go. And not only did they go back to the big budgets, they went even bigger.
Yeah. Well, also it's again during that time of fluctuation of where they chose the stories that they chose, for whatever the mindset was at the time of when they did these indies. It's like this has brought me to an interesting question because I've talked about the fact that it's like our audiences have also evolved over the years. And we have talked about it on previous shows as well, that there isn't a Children of a Lesser God that's being made any longer, or there isn't a, something that has a deeper meaning that it gives. It's like there's a lot of, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use the word superficial garbage or superficial topic that I should say would be what would be consumed as a classic lower independent film. It's like things that don't make you have to think, basically, in terms of that. It's like where we used to produce thinking movies that used to move emotionally, things that used to actually really captivate. And we're starting to get that now back in the independents. But during that time, what indie was considered now versus then, also in 10 years, has also evolved as well, from what subject matters used to be produced to what was produced in that time to what is produced today. How is that evolution changing that platform?
That's not all the fault of the studios. And the reason I say that
Mm-hmm.
is because studios are making what the audience wants to go see.
Yeah.
Right? So the studio's making Pirates of the Caribbean 5.
Yes.
Right? The studio's making Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yeah.
They're making Baywatch. Right?
Yes.
37. Right?
Yes.
The Lego movie. Like, they're making these big, huge movies because that's what the movie going public buys tickets to see. And so they're not. We can't blame them completely.
No.
The public has to take some of that responsibility, because it's not that we don't want to tell those stories necessarily. I will say, in the independent film world, in the world that I live,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it a little bit better. But here's the problem. The problem is I do limited theatrical releases.
Mm-hmm.
And I do them because it gives me the opportunity to control my domestic distribution, right?
Yes.
And I work with a company that is an expert at this, and I've done it many, many times. It's a very powerful way to get your film out into theaters, to garner reviews, to garner social media attention, and to get the movie out there in a way that's going to be profitable, that's going to get the attention of the international buyers around the world. That's why we do it, and it works.
Yes.
That said, if I'm going to go to a theater chain like AMC or Regal, and I just went through this last September with my
Mm-hmm.
movie Game of Faces. We did a executive produced that film, and we did a limited theatrical release. and we premiered it in Austin, Texas, and it was a really, really great experience for everybody. It was a small little movie. Um, but here's the problem in terms of jockeying for dates. When you've got this little movie,
Yep.
up against Pirates of the Caribbean 5 that's in, and you're in a Cineplex, and that movie is playing in 5 of the 10 theaters.
Yeah.
Right? In this one
Yes.
Cineplex, and you're over here in theater 12 in this little, 120 seat theater when everybody else is, back piling on top of each other in the 700 seat theater. How are you going to compete with that? It becomes very, very difficult.
Absolutely.
And as we've had more than one guest point out to us too, the reason why Hollywood keeps going with these big blockbuster films, even though many of them tend to lose money, but they only have to have that one that hits the $1 billion, and they've made their career.
And they made up for all of the other ones. And the truth is, we do the same thing, except on a much smaller level. So, for example, I had an investor not that long ago. He said to me, Franco, what kind of movie would you make if I wrote you a check for $5 million?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer was, I'd make 5 movies.
Yeah.
I'd make 5 movies with your $5 million. I diversify your risk, maximize my own filmmaking capacity, right? And I would make smaller films that I could get distribution of with the same idea in mind. That if I make 5 movies and 2 of them tank and one of them breaks even and one of them goes to the roof,
Yes.
then that fifth one is just sort of somewhere out there in nowhere land. At that point, it doesn't really matter, right? Because I'm going to be able to I have the best of all worlds, right?
True.
The winner going to compensate for all of the other films, and at the same time, if I had put all my investors' eggs into one basket of that $5 million, and that was the movie that tanked,
Mm-hmm.
all with
Yeah. All the 5 movies are going. Yeah, it's like, and then that's it. It's like a game over for that particular one, and making even in the ancillary markets, even with the way the ancillary markets are, it doesn't necessarily make up for the initial box office, does it?
No, it doesn't. In fact, let's just take one for example. You know the movie Snatched with Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn?
Yes.
That movie just got released.
Mm-hmm.
That it was the estimated budget for that movie was approximately $42 million. Now you've got
Holy cheese.
You've got 2 super bankable stars in this movie, right?
Yes.
You got Amy Schumer, who's sort of the newcomer, who's really got a huge fan base and presence these days. And then and she's the domestic draw, right? She's the the person in the movie that the people in the United States want to see, right? And then you've got Goldie Hawn, who's an icon, who of course the people in the United States love and want to see, but also she translates all around the world.
Yes.
She's a superstar around the world, right? So you have the best. You have a great combination. You have the best of both worlds in that movie in terms of casting. You couldn't have done a better job at casting. And you've got Jonathan Levine as the director. So here's the thing. To date, that movie has just barely grossed $40 million, which means that it hasn't even broken even yet. Okay, and that movie will do fine because that's just on the domestic, and it will do well in all probability in the international market.
Yeah.
But by no means is it considered a success. What would have been considered a success on a $2 million budget if it had done $100 million out of the gate on opening weekend.
True.
And then you build your international line after that. So I use that as an example because it's it's one of the most recent examples of a film that fits into this profile that we just talked about.
I wanted also to take a step back, though, also for just a minute there to talk a little bit about the investor as well. Is also we're going to then also talk about a little bit about aggregator versus distributor, as well as then we're going to talk a little bit about the AFM. Now, with the investors in terms of that. You had also spoken the last time a little bit about vetting your investor and their legitimacy and making sure that they are who they say that they are and they have the money that say that they have in regards to it. How is it that one can go about vetting their investor without actually insulting them and saying, I need a bank account?
Well, look, you just have to, and let me tell you why. Because you don't have to insult them, but there are definitely ways. But here's the problem. The problem is when it comes to money and financing, especially in this business, there's a lot of people out there who purport themselves to be something that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And the downside is if you don't properly vet your investors, you're going to end up spinning your wheels for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and there's going to be nothing at the other end. It's going to have turned out to be a colossal waste of time and probably money because of all of the attorney legal fees that are associated with having to get involved in the film financing. You got to pay lawyers to do that kind of stuff, and it's expensive. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't really afford to not vet your investors either financially or just sort of reputation wise. So and the way I look at it is any investor worth their salt is going to understand that, right? And they're gonna prove up. I just recently got $1 million put into escrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just that was because I was able to say, look, I've been doing this a long time. Now, if you've been doing it, a short time, it's a little harder, right? Because you don't have that track record, and I understand. Which, by the way, when I work with people one on one,
Mm-hmm.
I do that. I do the heavy lifting for them. I don't qualify their investors. I certainly qualify my own. But what I explain to them is you have to identify and qualify.
Okay.
If you move forward. So identifying is being able to say, okay, this particular individual, whether it's somebody that I know, or they're a friend of a friend or a family member, this person, I can identify for sure that they have the means to be able to make the investment, right? But you know what? You can't just buy a book by its cover. And I know you guys, you've heard all this before, but you
Mm-hmm.
can have somebody in a big, huge mansion and they haven't got a nickel to their name. And then you can have somebody that looks like a homeless person on the street and they're a billionaire, right? So you can't go by that. But what you can do is you can be honest and you can say, look, there's a lot at stake here, and I appreciate the fact that you're coming to the table and you're interested in investing in my project. And $500,000, for example, is a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and it's my responsibility as the producer or the executive producer or the filmmaker to make sure moving forward that before I bring all of the other people into the equation, that I have to be able to demonstrate for them that what you're purporting to have and to be is real. And so what you can start off with is asking them for some kind of a letter of commitment,
Mm-hmm.
LOC, and that commitment can be contingent. So there won't necessarily be proof of the funds. You're not necessarily going to have their bank account because
Correct.
probably have it appropriate. But if let's say their money is at Charles Schwab, let's say that's where their money resides.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't anything wrong with asking for a letter from the person who manages their money at Schwab to say something to the effect of A, this money is more than available, right?
Mm-hmm.
And B, that X amount of this person's money is earmarked towards project, X.
Okay.
Kill it to stone, because it's not enough for you to prove to me that you have. You can tell me you have $5 million in the bank and prove it, but that doesn't mean that any of it's coming to me.
True.
Right? So
Absolutely.
well, what if you could show me a bank account with $5 million in cash in it? That has nothing to do with me and my movie. So
Yeah.
either I need you to move the money into our production account and really prove it.
Yep.
Because that's
Yes.
And if you're going to ask somebody to move that money, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm accepting this money on a contingency basis. Because you told me, or I'm telling you, that I've got Gary Oldman, for example, in my movie, who I did a movie
Mm-hmm.
about. And if I can't get Gary to say yes and to commit, then I don't get to keep the money.
That's right.
It's the same. So you're doing it as a contingent on a contingency basis. So whether you get a letter from their film their management fund, their money funds, or you get them to actually put the money in your account, either way, you gotta step up and make sure it's real.
Well, which makes a lot of sense. And I was going to also ask in regards to that, it's like with regards to the investor itself, it's like also when they are doing that, it's like then they also manage to keep an eye on that through the guarantor as well. So it's like on our end, as filmmakers, it behooves us to also have our guarantor there on our end.
And listen, I don't have any problem by having my investors because it's their money. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't have I can't have them be a signer on an account, but I can certainly give them access to the online activity
Yes.
of the account, and they're more than welcome because it's either going to be me or somebody that I trust to make sure that that money doesn't move. I'll give you an example. I have a deal right now that I'm supposed to get around to financing in the beginning of June, here, the first week of June. And I'm about to send an email to my investor. He's already given me the first round.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 rounds. We call them tranches. It's a tranche.
Yes.
So every time there's money delivered into the production account, it's called a tranche. So this was a 3-tranche deal. And I've already received the first tranche. Well, I'm a little bit behind on my scheduling for the things I have to do to receive that second tranche. So I'm about to send out an email because today's the 31st, and that second tranche is due in the next 12 days.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm going to send an email to the investor asking him to hold that tranche.
Yeah.
I don't want that money. I don't want it in my account because I'm not ready for it yet.
Exactly.
Those are the kinds of things that you can do to demonstrate to an investor that you have
Mm-hmm.
their back.
Yeah.
And you're not just giving them money for the sake of giving them money, but that if you legitimately are in the situation, that you respect their money so much that you're not even going to accept it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is quite important. And I also wanted to ask you a little bit about working with aggregators. It's like, have you ever dealt with aggregators, and how do you find it different from working with distributors? And like, what would you recommend in certain situations? Like, do you recommend an aggregate? Where is the line of aggregator versus distributor, in your opinion?
I have never worked with aggregators, so I'm probably not really. I mean, in my world, the equivalent would be sort of a finder.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not really crazy about finders, and I'll tell you why. Because um, they don't usually have access to they want to have access to investors, but they don't. And it's very rare that they actually pull through. Um, I have been in a situation where I brought in somebody who reported themselves
Yes.
to have an investor that was interested in investing in a film, and that they wanted a finder's fee, which, by the way, the industry standard is 2 to 5%. So we agreed to the finder's fee. But then it turned out that we found out that the person that they were bringing to the table,
Mm-hmm.
the quote-unquote investor, was himself a finder.
Ah.
Okay? And so on and so forth, to the point where there was never actually any money at the end of the rainbow.
Okay.
These were all people that were signing finder fee agreements with each other.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Wow.
At the end of it. And so that's the reason I stay away from it. I want to deal with check writers.
Yeah.
That's what. If you can write a check, I want to have a conversation with you. If you're sincerely interested in exploring the industry, start off small. Maybe do 50,000 to do some development money,
Yeah.
or just 50,000. We can start off small. They don't have to start off writing $1 million checks, and in that way we can earn their trust as we go.
Yes. And do it in increments. with them. As we have delivered ours, you deliver your next, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Also, I wanted to also a little bit to talk about the AFM because it is coming up in November. I know that that sounds miles away, but it really isn't. It's like less than 6 months away. So you've been to the AFM in the past in regards to that. How do you think that the market has actually changed over time?
Well, first of all, I've been to the AFM 15 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I've ever not been to it. And part of it is because it's right here in my own backyard, right? I live in Austin.
Yes.
Um, and it's actually not too early. In fact, what I try to recommend is that people purchase their tickets early because the closer it gets, the more expensive it becomes. So if you're going to be an attendee,
Mm-hmm.
you should make sure you buy your ticket early. I recommend anybody who has never been to the AFM that's in the industry or wants to be in the industry absolutely positively should go at least once. Um, and they should do the 4-day pass because that's the least expensive, and you really don't need to do more than 4 days. There's more than enough time to do what you need to do. Um, but in terms of the market, well, I mean, everything changes constantly, and the reality is, this is a situation where you get to potentially meet distributors and film buyers from around the world, literally within the course of a week. You can travel around the entire world because they're all coming here to meet with us. So it's a really wonderful opportunity. I've always had great deal of success at the AFM every single year. That said, what it really comes down to is what's buying and what's selling.
Yes.
And that's when you want to keep your finger on the pulse. You want to find out what actors are selling in these movies, what directors are selling, what genres are they selling, and make those movies. And again, especially if you're starting off, it makes no sense to make a film your first time out if it's in a genre that nobody's buying right now. Like, find out what's selling, figure out this is where I come in.
Yes.
Under my program, I actually sit down with the distributors before we spend a nickel, before we even think about raising money, to find out what genre films are you looking for and who are the main actors that are selling these days and what kind of director should I be going out to get those actors. And I consult with those sales agents and owners of sales companies and distribution companies to get that vital information. Then I go make that movie.
Yes.
As opposed to doing it the other way around, where you go off and do your own thing based on what you think what you feel, and the story you want to tell, and then you find out nobody's interested in those stories, like we talked about earlier, and now you just spent $1 million of some investor's money, and you can't sell it, and you cannot get that money back. And it goes back to what I first said: getting the money isn't the hard part. Getting the money back is the hard part. And if you go and you spend $1 million of somebody's money and you don't have a mechanism to be able to retrieve that money and get it back, then you're going to get off to a very bad start as a filmmaker.
Yes.
People are not going to believe in you. People are not going to continue to support you. And that's why I say you've got to do it right the first time. And that's why I put the program together to help new filmmakers. I say to them all the time, do not. I had a class last night. I said it to the entire class. I said, I'm not here to prevent you from making mistakes. In fact, quite the contrary. I urge you to make those mistakes because that's the only way you're going to learn this business the way I did, by making a boatload of mistakes. What I'm here to help people do is avoid making those colossal career-ending mistakes that shut down any shot of you having a film career
Mm-hmm.
before you even get started. That's my.
Well, which makes a really good sense in terms of that role in there because it's like you can never have too much prevention. Let's put it that way, and have too much knowledge of the industry. A lot of people, though, do focus a lot on the art of the film, and they don't really focus on the business of the film.
Yeah, and you have to marry the two. You
Yeah.
can't we said earlier. It's like you can, if you're just making films for the sake of making them, make short films if you want to do that, because you're not
Yeah.
going to make any money back on a short. There's no place where you can recoup on a short. So if you really just love the idea of making movies and you just want to make them for your own vacation, then make short films and get all your friends and put it together and make the movies. But if you're going to be serious about having some kind of a career in filmmaking, you need to step up to the plate. Stop making those short films.
Yeah.
I've got people who all the time. They go, "Oh, I'm on my 8th short." I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to congratulate you on that, because if you're making 8 shorts, isn't it time you got serious and started making a feature film that you can sell and get money back for?"
Mm-hmm.
Now you're just repeating the same process over and over and over again. And a lot of the time it's because of fear. They don't want to jump into that world because they don't know how.
Yeah. And this is where having the education is also a really good idea, of having that and finding out how, and understanding what it takes, because a lot of people also don't understand what it takes to actually make it to that point.
This is the reason I put together my class. My class is a 6-week program. It's a one-on-one. So anybody who signs up for my class, it's the first thing I do with any filmmaker. Before I can get engaged in helping them, raising money for them, they have to understand how this works. And so, we touched on a few of the topics
Yes.
in this interview, and I appreciate that. But the course is a 6-week course where it's 90 minutes once a week. And they're all done on Skype, although they are done in person if the person lives in Los Angeles, of course. They come to my
Yes.
office. But 90% of my clients are all around the world, and we do it on Skype. And I take them through the steps one week after the other for 90 minutes each single week. And it's private. It's one-on-one. Up to 3 people can take the course at one time on the other side of the camera. And I bring them through explaining how money works, and equity, and debt, and distribution, and tax codes, and really do a deep dive, so that at the end of the 6 weeks, they really do understand what it takes to get a movie financed. Then, at that point, we can further assess whether there's an opportunity for us to work together on an actual movie.
Isn't it time now? Before film school has always been about making movies and not getting movies made.
Yep.
And isn't it time to start making business classes a part of the curriculum in a film school?
It's a really good question, and I want to be careful about how I answer it, because yes, it is. And one of my other catchphrases is film school teaches you how to make a movie, and I will teach you how to get that movie made, right? So, in a way, it's actually not in my interest for film schools to do that, because they would take this away. That said, and when I say I want to be careful, I've approached many of the film schools, particularly here in California, and they don't want that. They don't want them to know that stuff. They're afraid it's going to scare them away, in my opinion. I think they'd rather just stay in their little corner,
Mm-hmm.
teach them cameras and angles and lighting and all of the stuff that they teach in film school, because they need to know that stuff. Look, a good director, a good producer, a good writer, they have to know their craft. And I have no problem with them spending the money to go and do that. But at the end of the day, the reality is, I've been doing this for 20 years. They end up on my doorstep. They get out of school, they just spend $40,000 or $100,000 in film school, and they end up on my doorstep saying, "Okay, now what am I doing?"
Yeah.
And they have absolutely no idea what even the first step is. And that's the reason I put this class together, is because they have to know that stuff. So whether they did film school or not is almost irrelevant to me. But the chances are, you're absolutely right, they have not learned this, and they probably will not for a very long time.
Which is really a shame, because it's like then you're only getting a half an education.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at it that way. I mean, you're getting a full education on the creative.
Yes.
You're right. I mean, you're still being thrown to the wolves when you get out of it.
Yes.
And like I said, I've offered so many times to bring my class to these film schools, and they're just not interested in a guy like me. So
it's like they're gearing you to make movies, but they're not gearing you to be a success. Right, and I think that's a huge drawback.
Yeah, I agree. I have to agree with that.
Yeah, even Sid Haig had mentioned that in an interview with us as well.
Say it again. I missed that.
Even Sid Haig had mentioned that in an interview with us recently as well. Yeah. It's like, so it's quite interesting to hear it from that point of view as well. Because, yeah, it's what you don't know, you don't know. And that's the stuff that kills you when it's like you may think that you really have a great script, great screenwriting, and all of that, but without knowing the back end of the business, there really isn't a way of making that beyond the script and great idea. So it's like
the only way to learn it is to go out and do it.
Yeah.
Which I agree with as well, but do it right.
Yeah.
If you're gonna go up and do it well. You know, I tell these first-time directors, they come to me and they have these projects and they want to make their first movie, and it's like $4 million, $5 million. It's like nobody's gonna support that. If you're a first-time director, go make a movie for a couple $100,000 and get distribution and prove that you're worthy of the cause. You know.
Yeah.
And we'll support you. But if you're going to try to come out of the gate, that's just all ego. If you're going to try to come out of the gate and present a $5 million film for your first time when you have no experience and you've only done 3 shorts in film school, who the hell is going to finance that?
Exactly.
People, low budget films have such a bad aura about them, but it's really where you have to start.
You really do, and you know what? They don't have to be bad films. I know what I've seen lots of. Listen, I don't know if you guys know this, but I just recently became a member of the board of directors for a group called New Filmmakers LA.
Mm-hmm.
NFM.com to find out more about it. But these guys, they're amazing. I mean, we have a film festival every single month, both shorts and feature films. And we just recently did a 10-year anniversary where we did an award show for the best films of the year. These filmmakers are making films on shoestring budgets, and they're doing phenomenal work. It can be done. You don't need all this money. You'll be amazed at what you can do for $250,000 these days. And if you do it right, I can probably get you distribution. And if I get you distribution, you can make that money back, and you've proven yourself. Now we can start talking about a bigger budget.
Yeah, and at that point in time, it's like that's where the success happens. So, Franco, what is in your future plans? Because I definitely want you back again if you'll come back to us a third time. So tell us what's in the wings now. This very, very shortly for you.
Well, like I said, I'm leaving on Saturday to go to Detroit, Michigan to work on a television show. I'm co-creator of a TV show called American Injustice. So we're going to shoot some B-roll on that over the next week or so.
I'm
going off into TV. I have 3 films, like I said, that we're shooting for this year. One's called Stockholm. One is called Seance, and the third one's called Alexis Collette. They're all on my IMDb if anybody wants to look them up. Those are films that are in process of being in full. They're out of development now and going into pre-production. We have money raised on all 3 of those films. We're just setting those things up. And then my new thing that I've been talking about a few times today, which is the firm, I'm calling it.
Yes.
Which is the education aspect of this, with the course materials and teaching filmmakers how to do this the right way without stepping on their own toes, and how to approach investors in a proper manner, so that they don't. So that they can come out of the gate the first time and do it in an appropriate fashion. And so that's my big thing this year is the Finance Indie Roadmap, giving filmmakers literally a map of how do you get from here to there. So that's in a nutshell everything that's going on for me.
That's fantastic. Also, how do they get you in social media so that in case that they would like to get to the Indie Roadmap as well as also the other things as well?
Well, definitely Facebook is probably the best, because you probably just under Franco Sama or Samako Films. But under the Franco Sama Facebook page is where a lot of this information is posted, particularly the finance and the roadmap. And I'm on Twitter as well. And what I can do, I'm happy to do. First of all, samacofilms.com is the best way to reach me. So if anybody's interested in talking to me about any of these things, and by the way, I'm going to offer your readers, your listeners, what I offer everybody when I do an interview like this, which is a free 30-minute telephone consultation. So anybody who's in earshot of this is welcome to a free 30-minute telephone conversation where we can pick my brain and I can maybe answer any questions that might not have been answered here during the interview. So my website again is www.samacofilms.com, SAMACOFILMS, and they can just reach out to me through the contact us page, and I will respond accordingly.
Fantastic. And I'll also remind them to also tag you the fact that it's through Movietime, that they heard this as well.
Would love that. That would be a great way for me to know where they're coming from here.
Absolutely. And Arpo, how do they get you also on social media?
Well, surprisingly enough, they can also get me on Facebook, but not at his Facebook page, on my own, please. Under Richard Pochard. Also, if you want to talk some business, LinkedIn, but known frequent forums of the underground. Well, it's just chat, but make sure you tell me you're a fan of Movietime, because I get way too many offers from Armenian women who want to marry me for some reason. I don't know.
And also, you can. It's like, because you're just. It's that punam. It's the punam. You know, it's like it's that face. It's the face that claims, I want to be a husband.
It's the beard. I gotta get rid of the beard.
Yep.
Don't do it. Well, listen, guys, thank you again.
Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing me on the show, and I absolutely would love to come on again anytime. Just let me know.
Yes, please. And we look forward also to also showing you tonight our evening movie time. And for all of you, have a wonderful, wonderful day.